This is a warning for the following episode for Twisted Tales. It involves animal abuse, animal cruelty, animal death, and bestiality. This episode is not for the faint of heart, and some parts go into deep details and descriptions. If this is not for you, we will catch up with you on the next episode.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Alright, welcome back to Twisted Tales, folks. My next case was given to me by a lovely viewer, and this one's a little lesser known. It's probably known by a few people anyway. I never heard of this dude, but this tale will be on a dude named Frank Gust, and he's just a completely sick person. Now, he hails from way over in West Germany. He was born in a city called Oberhausen on Saturday, May 24th, 1969, and his zodiac sign is Gemini. So this place is just an awesome city on the river Emscher in the Ruhr area of Germany. It's located between Duisburg and Essen. So a little bit about good old Germany here. For one, it's a country located in Europe, and it's a wicked Western European country with a ton of landscape. Has lots of forests, a bunch of rivers, and a bunch of mountain ranges and North Sea beaches. So, I mean, you can't beat that, right? Now, it's very popular for having a strong economy and a high quality way of life, which includes like free education, free healthcare, and it's also a popular travel destination due to its rich culture history. Now, it has natural beauty from like historic sites like the Berlin Wall to even fairy tale castles, and natural landscapes and stuff. Germany actually has the largest economy in Europe. The country offers numerous job opportunities in sectors, say, like manufacturing and stuff like that. Now, it's also known for its cuisine, which include a variety of sausages, pretzels, and beer. So, back to it. Now, a fun fact. The day that Frank was born, the Beatles' single, Get Back, began a 5-week run at #1 on the US charts. But that was a special day. There's nothing really special about the day when Frankie Boy here was born, and there are some that say they've wished he'd never been born. So a little bit about Frank here. He was fascinated with death at a very young age, and since this intrigued him, he had studied it full tilt, reading about it all that he could, and he even started practicing on little animals at first, so he would start killing animals eventually. And later on in life, doctors would actually classify Gust as a sexual sadist. Now, at a very young age, like I said, he showed a tendency to commit animal abuse. He had experienced lust by torturing, killing, and gutting animals. Now, this little fascination with death can mean anything from like a normal curiosity about mortality to a distressing obsession. So this fascination can be driven by like the mystery of death, you know, anxiety, or like the process of grieving or whatnot, right? Now, research has shown that its preoccupation with death can be related to underlying mental health conditions such as anxiety related disorders, including like OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, or even GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, or social anxiety disorder. Now, this guy's crimes had spanned from the years of 1994 to 1998, and he was finally apprehended in 1999. So for 4 years, he left mutilated bodies in the wide open for anybody to find. And this left police baffled and the town scared shitless. Now, media had even dubbed this guy the Rhine-Ruhr Ripper because mostly his murders were committed in the Rhine-Ruhr region. Now, that region happens to be like the largest metropolitan region in Germany. Some say his crimes were just as bad as Jack the Ripper from back in the olden days. And, I kind of concur on this because I looked into this and it's pretty fucking bad. Like, pretty brutal. And they were just gruesome crimes. Like, body parts were all thrown around and stuff, all cut up, violated, and sexually assaulted in the most god-awful ways. So, the Rhine is one of the major rivers of Europe and the second longest river in Central and Western Europe. And the Ruhr is a river in Western Germany. It actually has a length of 219.2 kilometers, or say 136.2 miles, while the Rhine has a length of 1,230 kilometers, or 760 miles. So you put these two together, and you get, come on, say it with me, Rhine-Ruhr. Now it's actually named after the Rhine and Ruhr rivers, which are the region's defining geographical features. And historically, it's economic backbone of the whole place, because the source of the Ruhr is near the town of Winterberg in the mountainous Saarland region. So back to it. Now a little bit about Frankie here. He was the second son, born to his parents, who actually pretty much didn't give a shit about him. He grew up in a pretty ordinary neighborhood, actually, in the city of North Rhine-Westphalia. Now, this is actually Germany's most populous federal state. Frank's old man was a raging alcoholic. So, alcoholism is like a chronic disease in which a person craves drinks that contain alcohol, and they're unable to control his or her drinking. I've been there, done that. Now, alcohol intoxication can cause behavior problems and mental changes. So these may include like inappropriate behavior, unstable moods, piss poor judgment, slurred speech, problems with attention or memory, and poor coordination. You can also have periods of what's called blackouts, where you don't remember any events. Now, his father had vanished a little early in his life. Now, some fathers may leave their families due to various reasons, such as like struggling with responsibilities of parenthood, choosing another relationship, or personal issues like substance abuse, or like mental illness, or maybe some fathers just don't give a fuck, which I assumed Frank's father didn't care about him. Now, some fathers are actually overwhelmed by the responsibility of parenthood and may just leave to escape the stress. Some men are just unprepared for fatherhood or don't want to be fathers, and they leave to avoid responsibility. So when Frank was born, it took his father 3 days to come visit him. He wasn't even at the hospital of the initial birth of his son, right? And it was said here that he was actually getting drunk with his friends. So, obviously, I guess he didn't care to see the birth of his son. Now, Frank's mother, Dagner Eichhorn, she was a card reader. She liked to actually tell, like, fortunes for others and also read her son's fortunes throughout his life. So she would tell fortunes with cards. This is also known as cartomancy, which is a form of divination where the person interprets a spread of cards, say like a standard playing card deck or like a tarot card deck, to gain insight to the past, present, or future. Now, cartomancy can be done with traditional 52 card deck or a specialized tarot deck, which is actually a larger deck with unique cards, in addition to the 4 suits. So the meaning of the suits in both decks, like the suits are associated with a different area of life. I guess I'll just give you a little detail on this. So hearts, these are like emotions and relationships. Diamonds are finances, career, and work. Clubs would be like actions and spirituality. Spades are intellect and challenges. So, just stuff like that. Now, while it has been historically used for serious divination, modern cartomancy is often used for just entertainment, self-reflection, or as a tool to gain clarity, etc., etc. His mother had filed for divorce as his father was just a raging alcoholic, and this happened shortly after Frank was born. Now, without alimony from the father, as he neglected to pay child support and stuff, this left the mom to work full time, and he would be watched by his grandmother throughout the week. Now, alimony is a financial support that a person is ordered by court to give their spouse during separation or following divorce. Now, the length of alimony payments in Canada, at least, depends on the individual circumstances, right? Like, it's determined by the length of the marriage, like how long that goes. Payments can be limited from maybe 7.5 years to 15 years for like a 15-year marriage, or could be indefinite, right? Subject to change throughout like a court order or by mutual agreement of both parties if circumstances change. So Frank was watched by the grandmother, so she did a wonderful job with him, mind you. This was until she fell ill, and then he was actually put up in a nursery for most of his childhood, away from his mother and family. And this left Frank to spend the weekdays here in institutional care. So, leaving Frank to come home only on the weekends, right? So, seeing his family at 2 measly days a week. And when you're young, I mean, being away from your family, it's going to have its effects on you, right? Like, you need your family when you're growing up, right? So, what institutional care is, it's a type of residential care provided in an institution where a large group of people live under a structured and controlled environment. So the care is provided in a residential facility, such as like a large house or a specialized building where residents live day and night. So daily life here is actually governed by like strict routines and like the organization and whatnot. Individuals in institutional care are often separated from their families and the broader community. So examples of institutional care would be like orphanages or like children's homes, residential facilities for people with chronic illnesses or disabilities, and like city hospitals or like residential health facilities, juvenile detention centers, stuff like that, right? So this is where Frank had stayed for most of his childhood. And before the grandmother got ill, he spent most of his time here. And the neighboring kids actually bullied Frank. He didn't really get along with them here. It's pretty fucked up what they did to him here. Because Frank was just way too shy and he mostly kept to himself. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Now they thought of him as different and they would pick on him every chance that they got. And I'm not just talking about little fights or calling him names or anything. The shit that they did to him was harsh. They beat on him during school, even pretty much any time that they would see him anywhere, right? Just really heavily bullied by the other students. And this actually caused Frank to become a loner because he couldn't trust anybody, right? But some of those kids actually did some fucked up stuff. They had smeared some candy or say ice cream or chocolate or whatever all over his private parts. And then they'd beat him. And then they would either have a dog interacting with him during this time. The dog would lick it off Frank and they would all laugh at him here again and again, right? They would beat him and either make Frank call the dog over himself, do it that way too, right? I don't know. Shit just went on and on like this for the kid. And just imagine that, totally messing with your mind, right? Especially at a young age like that. For that to happen must have been extremely rough on his head. And not being able to tell anyone about that shit, keeping it to yourself, which he did, it's not good for anybody, right? And there was even one neighbor. This gets worse too. The neighbor actually lived by his grandmother. So he started to invite Frank over. And this was like not to just chill or like play games with Frank or anything, right? I mean, I'm sure that's how it started out, but it was things of a different nature. He actually began to sexually abuse Frank like every time that he was over there. And this dude actually got his jollies off by inviting his scumbag friends over there. He told them about Frank, and this led to the other men coming over to the house and then also joining in, and all of them would sexually abuse Frank. Obviously, this is fucking insane. Imagine to do this to a child. I mean, no child should have to go through that at all. Child growing up should have like a warm fucking home life. You know what I mean? None of this stuff. It's crazy. On a side note here, Frank's mother was actually sexually abused around the age of 4 as well, and going well into her childhood. Now, sometimes here, Frank would come home with bloody underwear due to being raped anally. Now, it's just crazy, man. Like, what do you even say to that? Like, did the mother speak up about that? Like, I don't know. It's just crazy. She didn't really say too much about these incidents, I would believe. Now, when he was 5 years old, his mom ended up getting a house and they moved in. Now, this was a tiny little house, but one nonetheless. Now, the grandmother and his older brother also had moved into the house with them. So, a few years later, around the year 1977, a man that his mom was seeing had came into the picture and thus became Frank's stepdad. And you think this would be a good thing, right? But nah. Now, before his new stepfather came into the picture, Frank would actually spend Sundays with his mother, crawl into bed with her, relax, spend time with her, because he only got so much time per week with her, right? So this is a time that Frank would just dearly cherish. But once the stepdad was in the house, all these times had stopped. Frank didn't spend much time with his mom or anything like that, because his stepdad was like a no-nonsense type dude, and he didn't allow him to do this anymore, right? So by the age of 8, his mom remarried this dude, and the grandmother had moved out some time later. Now, by this time, Frank had some trouble here. He was actually wetting the bed, and he had difficulty with the new relationship and all these changes. So I assume they came on pretty quick, right? Because the stepdad was like a strict, like, motherfucker, right? He would actually punish Frank for just the littlest thing. Now, bedwetting here, I'll get into that. Just a pretty common thing in, like, young children, right? Could be caused by a bunch of different factors like deep sleep, a small bladder, or producing more urine at night. So, while most children outgrow this, they should consult a doctor here if bedwetting continues past the age of 7, or it starts after a period of being dry, or is accompanied by other symptoms like pain, strong urges to urinate, or excessive thirst. And another thing here, trauma can also cause bedwetting in children. And I assume that's what was going on here, because stepfather would just smack him around and shit, punish him and all that. And this could be done, also from like stress, anxiety, physical effects on the body, stuff like that, or like some kind of like weird sleep patterns and whatnot. Now, there also were a few incidents here where Frank would actually play with feces and would sometimes hide shit under his bed to play with. Now, once the parents found out, especially his stepdad, he was actually beaten for this. Also, around this time, he would begin to shoplift from the local shops here in town, and he would lie to people about stuff, like about anything and everything. So, like, he'd have conversations here, and he'd just kind of, build his fucking rapport up with lies and shit like that. Now, the stepfather here had a harsh way about him, too. He got fed up if, like, kids cried and stuff, and he would just go, like, total hard ass here on the kids, right? And, this is what happened with Frank. So, Frank would cry, he'd get beat, And then later on, you don't want to cry or show that, you were sad around this dude. Frank's stepdad was like this fucking disciplinarian dude, right? So these guys believe in making people obey strict rules of behavior, and they punish them severely to anyone who disobeys them. Now, he was someone who believes in keeping complete control of the people that he was in charge of. Now, his stepfather later found out about the stealing here that Frank was doing, and he would search his pockets whenever he got home. So he'd search them before he left, right? And like, if he didn't have anything leaving, then why should he have something when he was coming back, right? So when he found the stolen stuff, he would just beat him here as punishment. And when Frank was 10 years old, he purchased a guinea pig from a friend. And Frank just loved this little dude, right? But upon bringing it home, he wasn't allowed to keep it. So he tried to bring it over to his grandmother's here, and she had also told him to get rid of it. So a guinea pig here is like a tailless South American rodent, and originally raised for food. It no longer occurs in the wild and is now typically kept as a pet or like a laboratory research guinea pig in certain places. So the guinea pig here actually enjoyed widespread popularity as a pet since its introduction to Europe and North America by European traders back in the 16th century. Now they're known for like their fucking friendly nature, responsiveness to handling and feeding, and it just like makes people like really happy to take care of them and stuff, right? Because they're like little dudes, and they're just very popular for like a choice of household pets. They actually have a lifespan between 5 and 7 years. Good for them. But even though Frank wanted this pet like nothing else, right? His family just didn't see eye to eye on the matter, right? And like his mom wouldn't let him keep it. His stepdad definitely didn't like the idea either, because he was actually allergic to like animal fur and whatnot, right? So I mean, even the last ditch effort here to ask his loving grandmother, right? She was like, "No, just get rid of it. You're not keeping it here." So that's what Frank did, you know? He got rid of it. But instead of letting it go into the wild, or finding a new owner to take care of it, or even giving it back to his buddy, Frank decided to toy with the animal and eventually kill it. So what he did, he tied the animal to like a stick and he beat it to death against a concrete block. Some say that he hit it at like such an angle where he tore this little guinea pig's stomach open. And when this happened, the animal's guts just splattered everywhere. And this is where little Frank had started to play with like the guts and everything, right? So he was spreading it around in his hands, feeling it between his fingers, just being gross with the insides of the animal. And these are called entrails, which means the internal organs, particularly the intestines, bowels of the animal and stuff. This includes like innards, guts, and viscera, a specialized term for the internal organs when they are outside the body. So the word entrails originates from the old French word entrails, which means internal parts, derived from the Latin word intralia, meaning the inward parts. The term evolved into Middle English as entrails, reflecting its consistent meaning and usage over time. Now, Frank had later described that while doing this here, he felt wicked strange, but it was just very intense for him. It's actually kicked up a feeling of pleasure inside him. So this later turned him into having a knack for torturing more animals down the road. So in a way, he said that this sort of awoken something inside of him. And he did kill a few more animals here, but eventually he did actually take control of this for a little bit, like for some part of his childhood. But it would later intensify during puberty here, and then it was totally out of his control. So later on, he began hunting rabbits and stealing them from people who own them, like on like little farms and stuff like that, or people who had them as pets. And then he would kill them and tear them apart barehanded to feel their warm insides. Frank was just trying to recapture the feeling of killing that guinea pig here by killing these other small animals going forward. He would always make sure the animal was dead before ripping out its stomach, right? Because, you can't be too fucking cruel. So what he now showed was the tendency to abuse animals, experiencing very high sexual arousal while doing this. You know, it's just crazy how he would like get off from like torturing, killing, and gutting animals, right? This is actually known as zoo sadism. It's paraphilia, where people are sexually aroused by torturing animals, which is just straight up fucking weird and wrong. And a paraphilia is like an intense and persistent sexual arousal or attraction to anything not sexual by nature. It's just like a sexual interest in anything than a legally consenting human partner. So all of this here can be caused by trauma in early childhood, abuse, neglect during childhood. So this can be caused by like different personality factors, like traits such as like impulsivity or sensation seeking, which also may like increase the risk of developing paraphilic disorders. Now, paraphilias seem to be largely male conditions. More than 50% of all paraphilias actually start before the age of 18. Now, paraphilias in women, mind you, it's actually kind of shown to be less than those in men. Now, some studies estimate that the prevalence are around to be like 1 in 20 cases among women, so it's not as much as males, right? And coinage of this term, paraphilia, has been credited to Frederick Solomon Cross back in 1903. So this dude was like a Croatian, Austrian, Jewish sexologist and folklorist. So good for him. Now later on, Frank would start moving on to like bigger animals. Frank would do this to fulfill his newfound lust for killing animals and playing with their insides. Now by the age of 13, old Frankie boy here would start breaking in to funeral homes, and he would look around, find the bodies that were inside, and he would start to have sex with those dead bodies so he could act out like all his like necrophiliac fucking craziness. And he would also slice open the already dead bodies here and then like, touch the insides and stuff. But these were too cold for Frank here. He wouldn't get the same feeling he would from like the warm insides, right? Now the funeral home where he did this was located at Hamborner Alley, 46049 Oberhausen. So this whole place has like a total area of like 35 hectares. So it's roughly some 86 acres or some shit. Now the act that he committed is called necrophilia, which is a terrible fucking thing. Now the act is often prosecuted under laws relating to the desecration of corpses or misconduct in respect to human remains. And like I said here, Frank would just be doing crazy shit here. Like one day the funeral director had just up and quit his job after finding the body and its head cut completely off. And obviously I assume this played a toll on him, right? Scared him for life, no doubt. Now Frank cut off the head and had left it by the front door and propped it up. So when the door opened, the head would just roll into sight of whoever came in. So it's crazy. I mean, like Frank totally messed with people, right? But I don't know. For him growing into somebody that would kill animals and everything, I mean, that's it's gonna be bad in the long run. Now, when he turned 16, he had enjoyed his freedom so much that he ended up putting himself into like a juvie home up in Oberhausen here at his own request, as he couldn't take living at his parents' anymore. So it's not like they really played a huge factor in his life anyway, right? Like the lack of parenting and stuff, the feeling of abandonment, and the abuse had given him the feeling of being powerless most of his childhood and throughout his teens. So as he reached adolescence, he decided to take that back and work on being powerful in his own sick way. This is why he killed a ton of animals, right? Because this right here had given him a sense of power over something. Now, around this time, Frank would find a horse. So Frank just found the horse and he's like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to kill this thing. And he gutted it and then he crawled right inside the dead animal so he could feel all the warmth of the horse's insides before they turned cold upon death. Now later on, and a little later on, Frank would start writing down all of his thoughts and stuff here. Wouldn't be the normal stuff that we do in order to de-stress and shit like that, but Frank more so wrote about women being in their final moments before death. How it would feel for him to hold their still beating hearts just a slight moment after he killed them. Until the age of 24 here, where he would actually start putting these crazy ideas on paper into real life motion. Frank had a bunch of journals and scrap paper on all these messed up little thoughts here that he kept in his own personal space. Somewhere down in the basement or wherever he had his personal space or something, right? Frank did this just to express all his frustration and anger, and it gave him a sense of control over a weaker victim. Now, in turn, this actually helped him desensitize. So, starting that desensitization process for future violence against humans, as we all know he was actually planning on doing anyway. And, you can only kill so many animals before wondering what humans had to offer up. So this process here makes it psychologically easier to commit more severe acts later, eventually escalating to human victims. So let's just say this serves as a practice session. Now, there are tons of serial killers over time that actually started practicing on animals. Dahmer and Bundy are both examples of this. Also, side note here, now a lot of their displaced anger and frustration, say from experiencing significant humiliation or abuse, whether it be physical, psychological, sexual, or whatnot during childhood, also could intertwine with how badly one hurts an animal and shit, right? And Frank suffered with all of this growing up. He couldn't tell his parents about the bullying and the sexual stuff, you know, all the humiliation involving the dogs from those kids and stuff like that, the rape and abuse from the numerous perverted men at that house that was over by his grandmother's, right? I don't know, it's just a way for him to feel powerful or some shit, right? Because he couldn't retaliate against those more powerful human abusers. So what he did and decided to do was displace all his hostility and aggression to vulnerable animals, and this would help him regain his sense of self-worth and then control, which he was obviously crack-a-lacking in his own life. So later on, by the time he was 20, he bought his own firearm, and he actually did this legally, and he had a permit and everything. So over in Germany, you can do this, but it's strictly regulated, and it requires a license after a lengthy application process. Legitimate reasons for ownership of a gun are limited to things like sport shooting, hunting, and collecting. Also, self-defense is actually not a valid reason to get a gun over there. Now, to obtain a license, applicants must pass a police background check, complete firearms training. They must undergo a psychological evaluation and have mandatory liability insurance and a secure storage system. Now, over in Canada, it's pretty much the same thing here. So, in order to legally own a firearm, you must have a valid possession and acquisition license, or what's known as PAL, P-A-L. Now, later on in life, Frank found work as a roofer for some time. I mean, this job's pretty decent. I have a lot of friends that actually do roofing jobs, actually. So they install, repair, and replace the roofs on buildings and houses, often using materials like shingles, asphalt, and, metal and stuff to make them weatherproof and not leak and shit. And they do this by using plans and specifications. So what a roofer does is they replace rotting materials like joists or plywood and apply sealants or other patches. They either tear off and dispose of existing roof systems. It's all different little stuff that they do, like carrying stuff up and down scaffolding. They'd set that up and then later tear it down. And whatever other equipment that's used there to ensure safe access and work at those heights. Now, Frank did work hard. He kept to himself. He began dating a woman there later on. Her name was Hazel. And some of his coworkers actually thought of him to be a bit of an odd fellow. But he worked alongside them and he did his thing, right? So they remember Gust was also a little bit quiet here, but he did make a little bit of small talk about motorcycles to them, because he actually built motorcycles on occasion here and there. But that wasn't the only thing that he did in his spare time. He would actually go out for drives and walks in fields to find larger animals to kill. He was getting tired of the small animals, right? Like I mentioned, the horse and whatnot. So he was now moving on, right? So he now moved up to lambs, horses, cows, and even foxes. So Frank would kill them, pull out their insides, then lay on them on the ground, right on top of the guts and all that. He said this here was his safe place. This is where he would feel at zen here. So a safe place is where individuals are protected from physical or psychological harm. They can feel secure and stuff, right? Feel free to express themselves without fear of judgment, harassment, or negative repercussions. But I mean, that's for normal people, right? And old Frankie boy wasn't too fucking normal here. And soon enough, he wouldn't be fulfilled with animal intestines. He'd just start to graduate to humans and began scouting the area for women. Now, his first victim would be in the year 1994. This was a 28-year-old hitchhiker, a woman from South Africa who lived in the Netherlands and was on a European trip. He decapitated her body, and she was found in a forest near Ede. And hitchhiking, it isn't always that safe, folks. You're literally relying on strangers, right? Doesn't matter what part of the world you're from. I mean, everybody knows the dangers of it. But I mean, it's still a common thing to do today, right? But back to it. So he murdered her on Thursday, September 8th. He took her to the Netherlands, where she had lived, and he shot her in the back of the head, and then he severed her hands and her head, and then he kind of cut her chest several times, and then he penetrated the corpse anally and vaginally. Now, during the return journey, he took the head with him here, and he performed sexual acts on the head, and that's fucking crazy. I'll go into a little bit more detail here. So on that day here, he was shooting rabbits. At some point, it started to rain, and he's like, nah, I'm not doing this. So he hopped in the car, and then he started driving around, and this is where he sees the hitchhiker. Now, she had asked him to be taken anywhere in the direction of Holland, and Gus was like, yeah, man, I'll take you some of the way. So they chatted all along the drive here. The two would crack jokes, just like old friends, right? And while driving and everything, right, he was just driving deeper and deeper into the woods, right? And she kind of noticed this, right? And sometime later here, he pulled over. He's like, oh, I gotta go take a piss. And he came back not long after and started patting his pockets for his car keys. He's like, oh, I must have dropped them when I went to go piss. She's like, oh, I'll help you find them, right? So she hops out, starts to help him look for the keys. She gets a bit ahead of him here, And this is when he pulls out his gun and blam, shoots her in the back of the head. Then he dragged her into the woods, stripped her of her clothing, and had sex with her dead body. He did this a few times before slicing her stomach open and then sticking his bare hands inside to feel her warm organs inside her body. And then he took a knife and slashed her chest several times and then penetrated the corpse with his penis anally and then vaginally. Yeah, this guy's creepy. So then he started stabbing her breasts and genitals repeatedly. Then he cut off her hands, severed them, and then he got rid of her hands deeper in the woods. He took a walk and disposed of them so she'd be harder to identify if police came across her. But like I said here, he took the head with him, left the rest of the body kind of close to the road here. And yeah, then he disposed of her head after he performed sexual acts on it. He actually used it one more time to pleasure himself here before he threw it off a bridge and into a river. Police ended up finding her body the very next day, discovering it in a wooded area in the Netherlands. And police were just totally stunned to find the body, like it had been decapitated and brutalized in such a way. Now, decapitated, thus meaning the head has been separated from the body. Now, this word's derived from the Latin words de, meaning off, and caput, meaning head, right? And this here is a total fatal injury to humans and sometimes animals. So this here, being decapitated, is a total fatal injury to humans and sometimes animals, as it deprives the brain of oxygenated blood by the way of severing through the jugular vein and common carotid artery, while all other organs are deprived of involuntary functions that are needed for the body to function. And due to all this excitement here after the kill, over the next few days here, Frank started bragging about the kill to his girlfriend, Azel. He actually even took the ID of the victims here and then showed it to her. She didn't believe him, so he drove her to the spot where he buried her 2 hands. And she still didn't believe him, because she was thinking like he was pulling some sort of prank on her. She did mention this to friends, and they didn't buy it either, saying that he was pulling a sick joke was all. And they ended up believing that the hands that she was shown were like from a doll or something like that, right? But that was it, nothing more. She didn't call police or anything, as her friends convinced her that he was just bragging and all this shit, right? And the two actually ended up breaking up sometime later in life. And he later met a woman named Ruth who had worked in town, and they started dating. They eventually married and had a child together, a daughter. So now he had this whole family life going on, right? And Gus was happy here. Like, he carried the baby around, changed her diapers, did all the dad things, right? And he later said that when he got the urge to feel the comforting warmth of entrails, he retreated to the cellar here. Now, at night, he would tinker around down there and take things apart and stuff like that. Now, the wife never did find out what he was taking apart down there, as no one was allowed in the cellar. That was a rule. So only he was allowed to go down there, nobody else. Now, Frank had hoped that the marriage would not only repress all his perverse garbage that was inside of him, but permanently eliminate it. But unfortunately, that ship didn't sail. But, you know, in their wedding photo here that I seen there, it shows the girl in white. She has a bouquet of sunflowers, some sweet peas and stalks and stuff like that. And Gus is wearing like a dusty rose-colored jacket. Seems to be like a little bit bigger on him and all that, but you know, they're holding hands and stuff. Seems like a nice little photo anyway, I guess. And although sometimes Frank would have trouble in the bedroom here, trying to keep it up in bed with his wife, he would start thinking about killing that hitchhiker and all the weird and terrible things he did to her. Then boom, he would have no issue getting aroused again. And Frank would also talk to his wife about like some weird fucking details that he kept in his head, you know, about like anatomical knowledge and stuff like that.
Shit like the heart being the size of a fist, a uterus is the size of a pear, and the brain is gray when viewed in daylight. And she didn't seem to be like too weirded out by this, She was actually amazed at his knowledge that he actually spewed out of his mouth. Like he was a very smart dude, right? Now, the longer that the marriage had lasted, the more often Gus seemed to be away. So he started suffering from like migraines. They ended up getting so painful that when he would like squint his eyes and stuff like that, his wife said that he would just grab the car keys and drive off somewhere instead of trying to deal with it, right? And one time here in 1994, Frank's mother had called him because she would do tarot readings on Frank, and every time she did it, he would end up getting the death card, right? So Frank explained to his mother that it's because he had killed somebody, right? She was just trying to check up on him here for the death card that always came up. So Frank played the death card twice with his mother, even after she reshuffled the deck. All that moved everything around, and yeah, he got the death card again. Now, funny thing here is he actually went to his mother's house not long after the first murder and actually gave her like an edited version of events. So he told his mom that it was an accident here because she ended up finding like this whole pistol that was in the glove box. So a struggle happened. The gun went off and he ended up ditching her in the woods, and the whole thing had been a mistake. But the mom just didn't buy into this. She thought he was just making shit up. Now, she did mention it to her boyfriend here about what was said and all that, and he was actually a cop. And you'd think, like, he would look into this, right? But all he said was Frank was doing this for attention and nothing more. Frank wasn't violent, he said. He's a quiet, meek person who wasn't capable of such brutality. And boy, was he ever wrong. And police even told her he's just full of shit, just forget about it. And obviously, it was forgotten about. So fast forward to the year 1996. So 2 years later, Frank would claim another victim. He murdered a 34-year-old prostitute, Svenja Dimder Eldin, on Tuesday, October 22nd. So let's get into that. So Frank would scope out the area of what's known as Essen Central Station. Now, this is a place known to have an abundance of prostitutes. This is located up in Essen, Germany, situated south of the old town center, next to the A40 motorway. Now, it opened up back in the year 1862 here, had renos done, was rebuilt in 1902, and then again in 1959 as the station suffered tons of damage during World War II. And then it was almost completely rebuilt in the 1950s and 60s there. Now, fun fact, prostitution is actually legal in Germany and are other aspects of the sex industry, including like brothels and stuff like that. Full service sex work is widespread and regulated by the German government, which levies taxes on it. Go figure. And sex work in historically German lands has never been outlawed. And during the Nazi era here, street-based sex workers were seen as degenerate and were sent to concentration camps, especially one here. This was the Ravensbrück camp. Now, some say that sex workers come from, like, let's say, piss-poor backgrounds. They can't get a job in society, which, in turn, leaves them to become ladies of the night. They just do this as a ways to make money, to get by. It's said here that they seem to be seen as pretty low stature amongst society. Serial killers usually target them as they think they'll never be missed, or they're just super easy targets. Or they just kill them because they have, like, some overwhelming hatred of women. There's lots of different reasons here. Like, another reason stems from, like, either the person that's going to kill them being neglected or rejected by their mothers during childhood.
And there are many serial killers who don't even regard women as humans, which in turn enables them to justify their own actions in their minds. Now, even in the United States, statistics from 2009 to 2019 say that 43% of victims of serial murders were known as sex workers. So, just a little info there. So, this place here is where he picked up this woman. They chatted it up, and she ended up getting into his vehicle and driving away with him. So they wanted to go to a more secluded place for some privacy. But it was here that Gus noticed that she was all fucked up on drugs and passing out on him here and there. But, whatever. They started getting busy in his car. So as they were being intimate, he grabbed his gun, coughed loudly, just to cover the sound of him cocking back on the gun, and he shot her in the back of the head. Blood, brain matter, and whatnot went fucking everywhere. All over the windows, all over the roof of the car, all over the inside. Now, just before he went to stab her and cut into her, he found out that the gunshot actually didn't kill her, and that she was still alive. But this didn't last long. He ended up finishing the job on her. So he then cut open her stomach and started to remove her organs one by one. Now it was here that his desire to feel her insides got so great that he had almost completely gutted her and almost removed everything that was inside of her. He later said that he reached maximum capacity at this point. Now, after removing most of her insides, he began to run through them with his hands and his fingers, and then he felt how warm they were, and then he jerked off a couple times until he reached climax. And obviously he didn't give one sweet fuck about this woman here. He fucking killed her without even thinking about it, just for his own pleasure. After that, he opened up this poor woman's chest cavity. Her arms and her hands were cut off, and they were placed beside her. Then he took out her heart, held her heart above her in both of his hands, feeling all powerful and all this. And then he cut her head off as well. Just like the last victim here. Now, the heart that he had, he ended up placing that between her legs, and it was shoved a ways up into her vagina. And the cut off head was also used again to pleasure himself before he discarded it into a nearby river, just as the last woman's head that he threw over too. And old Frankie boy just left her body on a forest path near Willage, and he threw her head into the Rhine at the Rheinberg Orsoy ferry dock for police to find. Now, police actually questioned him about the murder here after the body was located. They asked him if he was with her and this and that, but police decided that there was nothing to tie him to this gruesome murder here, and they let him go on his merry little way. And she was his second victim, folks. And it just sucks that he killed this defenseless woman, right? He did such terrible things to her. Police now began to try solving the crime here, but even now the town residents started to become scared shitless of going anywhere outside of their doors, especially the women in the society and all that, right? They would actually watch over each other, walk in groups and stuff, and never walk alone. And the town just filled with terror, right? Now, after this murder, Frank wanted to conjure up a few other ways on how to kill a woman. There's one instance here, he thought of blowing up a woman with explosives. So this had crossed his mind once or twice, right? He's like, well, why don't I put this into play, right? So now he was going to go find a way to put explosives inside of a woman. Now, the thought of blowing up a woman here, as she was fully conscious after he had raped her, had Gust totally joyful and giddy, right? And this is something that he'd actually act upon later on. Now, later on, in 1998, Frank moved in with his wife, Ruth, into her aunt's house. So this is his aunt-in-law, I guess. Her name was Geraldine Newman. She was a recently divorced woman, and everybody got along just fine, right? It was here that Frank actually got first dibs on the basement area, too. He's like, nope, nobody in the basement, keeping this all to myself. And even though it was her house, he fucking didn't let anybody down there. But as time went on, he got all chummy with Geraldine. They talked about life's ups and downs and all that shit, right? Frank actually became so close to her that, at one point, he started telling her about the murder that he committed. And he did this quite fucking openly and very vividly. He didn't care who he told, right? I mean, like, he, in my mind, like, he wanted to get caught for all this, right? So he was, like, telling people, but nobody was believing him, right? So he's like, well, if I tell people, they're not going to believe me anyway, right? I can get some of this off my chest kind of thing, right? Now, not long after, this is April 19th, 1998, Gust killed Geraldine Newman. Now, some say that he dismembered the body and threw the parts into the woods, and some of her remains ended up in this local wildlife feeding station. Now, some say that she heard Frank tell her about the killings, and then she gave him the option to either turn himself in or that she would call the cops herself. And Frank killed her to silence her. Now, people just thought that she just disappeared, right? You know, she took the stresses on of the divorce and everything like that, right? So they were like, well, maybe she just packed up and left the area, right? Because she was just such a nice woman. Now, police were even called in to investigate here. They questioned Frank yet again, but they didn't think that he was a suspect at all. Even his wife didn't know what happened to her and never once suspected her husband of doing anything to her, as the two had got along just fine, right?
Like, this is kind of weird, but I mean, like, I guess the guy didn't look like a crazy person who went around ripping open women's bodies, right? Uh, Geraldine's body was never recovered, and she was 47 years old. And now, Frank would start stalking the red light district again, and claiming his final and fourth victim. Her name was Sandra Osterweich. Now, on June 20th, 1998, old Frank the Tank here had made a return to the red light district. So here, he ended up flirting and picked up a 26-year-old woman who was on the clock. So she got into his vehicle, lickety-split, talked to him a little bit here. So it got to the point of the conversation that Gust had asked her if it was cool to tie her up. You know, a little bondage action, right? And this refers to a form of sex play that involves consensually trying to restrain a partner in like a sex position to give or receive sexual pleasure. So for this bit of fun, he offered her up 400 German marks, to which she agreed to, as she was actually addicted to heroin at the time and needed some more for down the road. Because, I mean, like, heroin's just, like, fucking crazy drug. It's actually an opiate drug made from morphine, a natural substance, taken from the seed pod of various opium poppy plants grown in Southeast and Southwest Asia, Mexico, and Colombia. Now, heroin could be a white or brown powder or a black sticky substance known as black tar heroin. So what people do is they inject, sniff, snort, or smoke heroin. Sometimes people mix heroin with crack cocaine, which is called speedballing, as these ways of taking heroin send it right to the fucking brain, and it makes it very highly addictive because it works very quickly. And people who use heroin report like feeling like a rush, like a surge of pleasure or whatnot, right? Such as like a, like a warm flushing of the skin. It'll give them dry mouth, a heavy feeling in the arms and legs. And, later on it might cause like severe itching, nausea, all that. Like, these are like the first effects here. They usually feel a little bit drowsy for several hours, and their breathing will slow down. So, I mean, it's fucking crazy. But people who use heroin over like long terms may develop like many different health problems. These could include like liver, kidney, and lung disease, mental disorders and stuff. And some people do kick this habit, though, but I mean, it takes a lot of help to do so. So, I mean, if you get addicted, I mean, the help is out there, right? You just got to go down the right path, and you want to do it for yourself. So, back to it here. Gust had wanted a bit of fun with her because he'd been planning this murder for months. Now, once he got to a secluded spot, he tied her up using ratchet straps. He tied her up so tight that she began to complain about it, but he didn't give a fuck. And since she complained, he actually ended up tightening the restraints up a little bit more, which caused her to groan and moan a bit, right? So she kept on trying to talk to him. He didn't want to hear it, so he actually muffled these sounds by putting duct tape over her mouth. And once she was subdued, he toyed with her. He started biting her. He burned her with a cigarette lighter a few times, just torturing her for hours. Whatever would pop into his head, he would do. And upon burning her and biting her and everything, he would actually rape her in between all this. Now, as he did these acts, he was whispering in her ear, telling her all the terrible things that he was going to inflict upon her. Obviously, this made her super uneasy, right? She knew, fuck, there's no escape, I'm going to die and everything, right? But Frank wanted this kind of power to be held over the women that he abducted. Now, Gus was just talking shit to her, right? He said that he would gut her stomach and rip out her heart and show it to her as she began to die. He spoke about using the tow hitch on his car to tie her to the other side of it and then tie her to something else and then rip her completely apart. Totally crazy, right? So he tortured her so severely that he had no idea how severe her vaginal injuries were after he was raping her, cutting her and everything. So he thought for a quick moment here of actually getting her to a hospital. But then he thought better of it, and he actually handed her the loaded gun that he had on him and asked her to shoot him. And he said, "If you don't shoot me now, I will kill you," because he realized that his behavior would continue on just to be totally horrible towards her. I mean, this was that guy's fucking nature now, right? He knew he had to be stopped. So he told her, "You better put an end to this shit." But she refused, right? She was just scared shitless, saying that she just wanted him to let her go. He then untied her from her bonds and pretended that he wanted to release her. So after he released her and everything, she got out of the car. She began to run away to freedom, or so she thought anyways. Gust pulled out his gun, slowly took aim, and shot her from behind, right in the back of the head, killing her instantly. And then he went to work on her corpse in more ways than one. Now, she may have ran fast, but Frank's bullets could run much faster than she could. So Frank began to cut off her hands because he couldn't undo the whole handcuffs completely because they were still halfway on or whatever, right? And this dude severed her hands no problem. It was just second nature to him now, right? Like a practical move or what have you. He was proud of this murder because of the fact that he tortured her so physically and so mentally that he could pretty much torture her no more. And the torture went on for more than a 2 hour period. He took his sweet time with her, man, and she suffered so much throughout this. Now, when the cops found the body and investigated further, there was another man that had later been arrested for this murder, but the sperm that was found in the body wasn't a match, and this led to that dude being released from jail. So the criminal was, still around and everything. So the police began to think that all these crimes had to be the work of the same man because now there was a serial killer on their hands around the region. Now, a few weeks after the last murder, Gus just had a big old bit of free time. So he decided to purchase a sheep. And he did this so he could torture it and later blow him up with explosives. So what he did is he tried to imagine how resilient a woman could be
And, the thought ran in his mind about blowing up a woman who had been fully conscious after he had raped her. Like the second after he raped her and everything, and he was just gonna go, boop, there you go, exploded. Guy was insane. Now, what he did is he drove the sheep to like this little hut in the forest that he knew of, and he told his wife that he was gonna go fly his model airplane. Nice hobby and all. So he tied the sheep up. Imagine that he was doing this duty to like a defenseless young woman. He tortured the sheep by plucking out one of its eyes and penetrating the bleeding eye socket. Just sticking things in and just moving it around. So Frank ended up making all these like homemade explosives and stuff, right? So what he did is he prepared 2 explosive charges, put them in the animal's body. Now he shoved them in a condom here and then right up the ass. So by him inserting rectally, this refers to the administration of a substance or device in the rectum, like the final section of large intestine, closest to the anus. Then he explained to the sheep, talking to him and stuff. He's like, hey man, I'm just gonna explode you and kill you and all this, right? And yeah, but in his imagination, Frank actually was so fucked up, like he thought that he was talking to a real woman who he saw in front of him. Now, Gus later said that he was picturing a beautiful woman in front of him instead of the sheep. What this is known as is a hallucination, which is a sensory experience that seems real, but it's created by the mind. It can affect any of the 5 senses, including like seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or feeling things that no one else can. Now, hallucinations can be caused by like mental illness, some medications, physical illnesses, sleep related issues, sleep deprivation and shit, or sometimes substance abuse. This could be alarming for the person that's experiencing them, right? Sometimes they just play along with it, right? So Gust took a few steps back and was still yammering onto the sheep as if it were a woman. So he stepped behind the little hut, lit a cigarette, smoked a few drags, and then he detonated the device, blowing up the sheep to pieces. So, kaboom, bits and pieces of the sheep went everywhere.
So after the very loud explosion, there was nothing but silence. So sometime after, he packed up his things and he fled the area. Now, Gust had been planning to use these explosives real soon on a woman. And this would be like a little bit after he'd done some planning and stuff here. But just like his first crime, old Frank here just couldn't contain his excitement about his last crime. So he ended up blabbing all the details to dear old Mom yet again. Now, in May of 1999, he called his mother. This was sometime after midnight. He said, Mom, I've done some terrible things. I've actually hurt women. And then he just hung up the phone, said nothing else. Now, I'm not sure why he did this, as he had no remorse or any disregard from what he had done, right? Maybe this was like some sort of like relief or something like that, right? To him anyway, right? Now his mom ended up telling Frank's stepsister Daniela, who then took no time in acting on this news, right? Sometime after, she contacted police, so didn't take her any time to fucking spill the beans on old Frankie here. So police showed up, they talked to him about the murdered women, and they requested his DNA to try to match it to the crimes, like the sperm and all that. And Frank's just like, there's no need, guys, because I'm the man you're looking for. And then he admitted his crimes to the interrogating officers. And now all these crimes would now just stop. They all halted. And police picked him up. They brought him into the station. And over a 13-hour period, they interrogated him, and he confessed to the 4 murders. Now he talked to detectives very calmly, telling details in a chilling manner, detailing like every single moment, right? Every injury, every tool that he used, and he even fixed mistakes that were in the police reports that they filed prior to this. And he actually like ended up looking them all over and stuff, right? And he was like, no, it was done this way, and with this weapon, etc. And one detective actually commented that it was like interviewing a surgeon with a grudge against life itself. Now, Dr. Thomas Mueller here, this is one of Germany's leading criminal profilers, had looked into Gust. He found Gust not to be psychotic or anything of that nature. After looking into his background, it was found that Gust knew what he did was wrong, and that he just didn't care about the things that he did. It wasn't lust that he did all these things with, right? It was just all about control, he said. Now, Gus told them about his time in the funeral home, fucking the dead bodies and felt them being cold and all that. He said, cold bodies are disappointing. I want the warmth, and this is why I went out and did these things. Now, Gus stated to them that his greatest desire was to actually touch the beating heart of a dying woman. And he did this, Now, later on, doctors and other highly trained officials mentioned that Gust was found to have a diminished sense of empathy. So this means like a reduction in apathy, which is like the state of indifference, lack of motivation, and emotional responsiveness. Now, it describes an improvement in a person's ability to feel emotions, have interests, and initiate goal-directed activities. Now, they become like more engaged and less emotionally detached. This state actually indicates a move away from a feeling of emotion, numbness, and towards a greater sense of purpose and connection. So, yeah, that was old Frank, I guess. And once the media got a hold of this guy's arrest, boom, the headlines just fucking flew. Now, police obtained a search warrant here and began to search his whole place, the basement, everything, right? Because that's where he spent most of his time. This right here made police wicked uneasy, too. They found all his notes of his fucked up fantasies, murder weapons, all his homemade explosives, and all the crazy little rants that he had on his computer. So this is all saved on one of his files. The file was called Test X Storage Capacity Test. Now, Gust had compiled a list of supplies on there. So the list of supplies included 8 cable ties, at least 37.5 centimeters long, 4 pieces of tape, 10 centimeters wide, 35 centimeters long, 2 pairs of disposable vinyl gloves, small, 5 condoms, 10 garbage bags, thick, cutters and blades, condom filled with gunpowder, and 3 pieces of primer, some sulfur or hychloric acid as highly concentrated as possible, 3 explosive capsules, 3 incendiary capsules, and he prepared a spoon that was sharpened on one side. So when police asked him about the spoon, he told them that it was for a victim because he wanted to remove the eye of a victim while she was still alive, like stick it in and fucking gouge it out. Now, police also found out about the animals that he killed, too. He actually did some of this in his basement that he had in the place with his wife. Now, when they asked Frank how many animals he killed throughout his time, Frank just said it was at least several hundred, he said, but more likely less than 1,000. And then he was arrested, and his trial date was set for the summer of 2000 in August. Now, he straight up requested that they give him the death penalty, but Germany already kiboshed the death penalty long, long ago. Now, that was gone actually nationwide with basic law sometime back in the year 1949, prohibiting it for crimes in West Germany, with East Germany following suit in 1987. The last execution in Germany was in East Germany back in 81. Now, during trial, Gus told the entire court about his crimes. He spared zero detail of all 4 murders, telling the media outlets that, he straight up should never walk free again, and that he should be locked up for the remainder of his life. Now, on September 21st, 2000, the Duisburg jury sentenced Gus to life in prison, and he was charged with those 4 murders. And, yeah, he was sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of jail so he could get some sort of treatment. But he dipped out after about a 6-month period as he knew he couldn't be helped by anyone. and he refused treatment as he thought that no treatment could help him. He literally said to everybody here, if I'm ever to be released, I will kill again. And then he was transferred to a regular-ass prison. Now, his wife left him, obviously. She actually wrote him a note because she wanted some answers as to why he did the things that he did, right? Like they had a kid together and all this, right? She deserves some answers. And he actually replied and gave her some details, in his fucked up way. So he wrote, "You and I are walking through a shop, and a pretty woman comes into my view. I see her and think, pretty, and that's it. Now the same situation without your presence. I see the woman, and as soon as I don't classify her as ugly, the term cattle for slaughter flashes through my mind. Everything around me becomes irrelevant in a split second, and just as quickly an accurate image of how I'm going to torture and kill her builds up." And that's what he wrote to her. He explained his whole Jekyll and Hyde situation, and that was that. Pretty self-explanatory anyway, I suppose. Now, even his own daughter, she wasn't told about her father's crimes. She was only told that her father had to go away for a long, long time because he was a very sick man. Now, Gust ended up later remarrying while he was in the can, and this was a woman that he met through writing letters. And honestly, he's actually scheduled to be released in the year 2026, so next year. Let's hope this guy never gets released. I mean, even over the years, he claims that he's changed his ways and is a completely different version of himself. I don't think so. And since 2020, he's been held up in a Wuerl prison. So this place holds like 900 inmates or so. It's actually one of the largest prisons in Germany. It's located in the town of Wuerl in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, east of Dortmund. And here's a fun fact. After World War II, the British military used Wuerl prison to house Nazi war criminals that they had convicted during the occupation. So, good for them. And as we wind down here, pretty much since 2020, Gust has been granted monitored outings from jail as well. So what this does here is, this here allows individuals to participate in community activities under strict supervision. The primary goal here is to facilitate an offender's gradual reintegration into the community while ensuring public safety. Now, it's said here that he wants to live a life of freedom with his new wife. And yeah, even though he fucking murdered, like, in the most heinous ways, this guy wants out, right? Now, his mother also made mention that releasing him will be a terrible idea. She said this: "They should leave him locked up in jail. Leave him inside. Otherwise, another woman will die." And she's probably right. This guy fucking murdered 4 women and didn't even think twice about it. And Gust is now 56 years old, and I assume he's still a piece of shit human being. And with that, folks, I hope you guys enjoyed this little tale. That's all I got for you, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. I'll actually be doing a collab with one of my buddies here on Facebook there, Hair Trigger. So he's a rapper, and he's gonna pop on, do some stuff with me there, because he has a story about a haunted tower. And we'll get into that here and some other haunted spots around his area here. So this will be about Enger Tower. So look out for that. And you can check his Facebook out. And yeah, have a good one. So I thank you very much for tuning in to Twisted Tales. Have yourself a wonderful night, folks.
Twisted Tales.